Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, meeting documents are available for review down next to Commissioner Heiberger. It's just a quick reminder to silence your cell phones, and if you're listening remotely, to put your phone on mute. And Craig and Carol are around here somewhere if you need a listening device. So that would take us to routine business. First item would be a motion. I'd consider a motion to approve the agenda.
So move. Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Next item is to approve meeting minutes for two different meetings. First, we'll take a motion on the special commission meeting election canvass on June 8th, 2020.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Next item are the minutes for the commission meeting on June 9th, 2020.
Move approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Next item are bills to be paid in the amount of $3,529,437.96.
Pay the bills.
Second.
Motion and second. Any comments? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Next item, we have several reports there. Reports from the sheriff and from the Register of Deeds, the auditor's account, and the auditor's financial statements. Normally the auditor presents on those, but we went over all of those in our budget hearing yesterday. So next item are personnel actions. I'd consider a motion to approve the routine personnel actions.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Next item are abatements recommended for approval. Any abatements recommended for approval? I mean, there are none. Sorry. Next item is item 7. There are no notices and requests. Item 8, there are no planning and zoning notices. That takes us to item 9, petition for a compromise of lien. And I believe Melinda is going to walk us through that. We're going kind of fast, so we're probably a little bit ahead of her.
I think she might. Do you want me to jump out there quick?
Thank you.
I can hear her.
The meeting just
She
started
might
2
be on the
minutes ago.
phone or something.
Good morning, Melinda Storley, Commission Assistant. DPNO 20218 in the amount of $3,651.32 names two lienees, the petitioner and her ex-husband. They divorced October 31st, 1989. The action requested today is to release the petitioner and the real property from the joint lien with no payment, leaving the lien in the amount in full against the ex-spouse. I shouldn't have run. Excuse me. Excuse me. The lien fees recorded from January 1989 to December 2012 for poor relief and legal representation were applied for by her ex-husband only. She does not believe she should be responsible for the lien fees recorded during their marriage. In 1986, for $51.71 for the public defender services he received for a DUI, or for the rest of the fees recorded after they were divorced, and is requesting to be released from the lien and from any responsibility. The petitioner currently lives in Watertown, South Dakota, and would like to sell her home in Sioux Falls. She is requesting that the real property be released from the lien. Her husband has never been a joint owner and has no interest in the property. Unfortunately, the lien is attached to the home located at 3134 North Jessica, legally described as Lot 4, Block 3. Islam addition to the city of Sioux Falls. I should have looked for that pronunciation.
You other questions for Melinda? Is the applicant here?
No, she's in Watertown.
We should ask, or talk for a little bit so Melinda can catch her breath.
So sorry.
I think we scared her too, so. Take the breath away.
Well, Madam Chair, I certainly have no problem releasing the items that were after the divorce. Do we have the info on the ex-spouse also at this point?
On the, what
The
type of?
ex-spouse, the,
What type of information are you wanting?
his name and
Yes,
all
we do.
that
It's on
stuff.
the lien summary, yes. And that lien that she's talking about for the 5170 was for a DUI for the ex-spouse.
But it was while they were still
Yes, it was
married.
while they were married.
Commissioner Heiberger?
I thought the same thing, Jeff, but the other thing is, when did she buy the house? Maybe she bought the house after the
She
divorce.
actually remarried in 1995 to a George Murray, who is now deceased.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how she acquired that home.
So that home was not a part of their marriage?
No.
So I would make a motion to release in full and leave the entire lien against the person who acquired these.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any other comments? Roll call vote, please.
Barth. Aye. Benega.
Aye.
Hiberger. Aye. Karski.
Aye.
Bender.
Aye. Motion passes
Thank you
unanimously.
for your
Thank you
time.
so much.
Thank you.
Walk back.
All right, this is opportunity for public comment. Is there anyone here today for public comment? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to regular business. First item of regular business is a brief presentation on the Minnehaha County Pretrial Services. Aaron Surska. Good morning, everyone.
We have a lot today.
If you're out of breath, take a moment.
Well, we forget there's a little bit of a delay and we're kind of chatting and catching up.
It's good to see all of you.
Yes, good morning. All right, I'm Erin Surska. I'm here today to give an update and a briefing regarding pretrial services. Can I push? There we go. So this is what we're going to go over today. I'm going to kind of review a complete timeline of the work regarding pretrial, kind of really how the county stepped into this work, some of the milestones that have happened through the last actually 5 years, and then some next steps. I'll walk through a few of the data points, step into some of the expanding work scope as pretrial started one thing with one vision, and it's really been able to be agile and meet the needs of our county. And then we're going to have a quick facial recognition demo from our pretrial services staff. I know. Yeah, I can. Yeah. Mm-mm. Oh, one slide. There we go. Thank you. So this is the pretrial timeline. I think it was a really good exercise for me to kind of put this together and dig through files from the last 5 years and really kind of articulate to you all what we've gone through the past 5 years to get to where we are today. So as you can see, this discussion originally started way back in 2015. There was a lot of discussions going on regarding our adult criminal justice system, and we were able to get an outside entity, CRJ, to come in and do a full pretrial evaluation report. And that was done. They interviewed different stakeholders, looked at our data, and they provided a report and a set of 5 recommendations to implement to help improve our pretrial process. So after the commission received that report, there was a small working group or committee formed to kind of work together to develop a work plan to see how to kind of move forward with those recommendations. So in 2016, so the end of 2015, the work group was formed. There was a work plan articulated. And the first priority at that point was to find a risk instrument to utilize for the point of pretrial release. So during 2016, that was really what that year was dedicated to. There's a lot of different risk instruments out there across the nation being used, and some are even homegrown, but after doing our research, the work group decided to try to pursue the Arnold, at that time it was Arnold Foundation, now they're Arnold Ventures, PSA, which is a public safety assessment. And the reason that one was decided to go through is because of the amount of research that went to behind the use of that tool. It's an objective tool. It did not need an interview, which was really important to a lot of our stakeholders. And it's probably one of the quickest ones to use because you don't need that interview, and it's based on actually your criminal history. So that was 2016. And at that point, now this PSA tool is actually public. Anyone can use it, but at that point, you needed to submit an application to be approved to utilize that application. So during 2016, we did all the work to get all the stakeholders on board, get our letters of recommendation, and put together an application. And that application was actually approved in 2016. And in an event that's never occurred before, Arnold Foundation, the county, and the UJS actually entered into an MOU for utilization of the PSA. So that was at the end of 2016. There's a press conference and everything. It was a pretty exciting moment to get that. In 2017 was really dedicated to implementation of this tool. Even though it's already a pre-made tool, there's a lot of work to get ready. I mean, you're instituting a whole new section of the criminal justice system. And our criminal justice system, as it's one system, is actually made up of multiple different departments, multiple different elected officials, multiple different decision makers. So that year was dedicated to bring all those folks together to get the things in place to implement. And one of the first things we did is we worked with the Arnold Foundation. We brought Pennington County on board to utilize that tool as well. They, at that point, had already started working with the MacArthur Foundation in implementing different pretrial protocols, and they were looking at doing a risk tool. So we worked collaboratively with them to make sure that we were using the same risk tool, got them on board, so then we were implementing and going through the processes and milestones that year to implement it together. There was, some of the things that we had to do was develop our list of violent offenses, create a matrix or a grid as far as a decision-making framework, what it was called at that time, to decide what do you do with that risk score. And then also try to figure out what are we gonna use for our software, how are we gonna track this, how are we gonna keep this. And at that point, we were able to, because of different things that we were involved in as a county, including data-driven justice, we were able to find a software solution at no cost to the county or any stakeholders, which is a big deal. Open Lattice is known for being able to combine data across systems. So what we're able to engage in this year is working toward having one system for our pretrial services to use that automatically combines data from our local law enforcement and our court data to produce this tool. There's a few call-out boxes on this timeline, as you can see. And this year was really exciting because we were asked to apply for our first MacArthur grant. It was for a $50,000 innovation grant. So because of the leadership from you guys, them seeing the different work that you were engaging with, and with our sheriff's office as well, doing different work, we were asked to apply for that. And that $50,000 was actually the funding that was utilized to get the triage project kind of that next level, do that baseline report, the conceptual report, hire the researcher and all of that. So that was an exciting year as well for that, to have that work come on board and be recognized. So if you go into 2018, that's when we actually started implementing the PSA. That's including hiring 2 pretrial staff. And 2018, the first half, was a lot of work. We had a lot of the different pieces decided in 2017, but in the first part of 2018 was really focused on building a software application from scratch to bring 2 systems together in order to complete the tool and give the information to pretrial and the judges that was necessary. And which is a very heavy lift because you have to go through to make sure it's coming together, making sure it's coming together right, and producing the right thing that you need for all the stakeholders involved. So given that we went live with the PSA that year in August of 2018, that's a large, enormous amount of work to get done in 8 months, so it's something that we should be proud of in 2018, going live that quickly and getting that system up and going. So the last half of 2018, last 4 or 5 months, was going live with the PSA, starting with one court at a time, working out each process of how you get the information, what you do with the information, how you get to each judge, and how it was going to use. So that was a very exciting piece as well. And then starting in 2019 is when we were able to expand the pretrial scope. Now that we have the PSA, we have the software to use it, we have it implemented in all the courts. Now it's to look at kind of the next step. And we were able to get Lincoln County on board to be a part of our pretrial processes. They're actually assisting and paying for one of the FTEs of our pretrial as of right now. And something else that was exciting in 2019 is we were asked, because of our progress of the first grant and their progress in pretrial and other things, asked to apply to be an implementation site for the MacArthur Foundation. And we applied and were awarded $350,000 per year for 2 years at that point. So with Lincoln County's contribution and with some of this grant funding and a little contribution from the county, we're able to add an additional FTE. Something else that we added during this year was we really wanted to integrate with the sheriff's office. There's a lot of information that the sheriff's office has, a lot of collaboration as we're looking at releasing folks from pretrial. And we have Corporal Jasmine Thielen right here. He's way over there. Oh, you're behind my. And the MacArthur Foundation allowed to get, I know that the sheriff's office had planned on having this position within their office, but waiting until that new jail opened for next year. But we're able to jumpstart that position to be a part of pretrial as we started the planning to actually launch pretrial monitoring. And even though it sounds simple, it's not. It's a another whole new piece of court, releasing somebody to a whole new program. How do they get released? How do they get on there? What are the levels? How are they checking in? Can we get everybody on the same page? What happens if they don't check in? So all of that work was done in collaboration with the sheriff's office in our courts 2019. And you come to this year, we were able to launch our pretrial monitoring, and I'll get into that, different options there. So we're now launched in all magistrate and circuit courts as well. Something else that happened last year in our in expanding of services as well was court reminders, text messages, similar to how you get text message reminders for doctor appointments or for dentist appointments. We were able to launch that, and I'll talk through that a little bit later, as well as stepping in and assisting on some of the case processing recommendations from the MacArthur Foundation, some of their initial recommendations as well. So that brings us to here where we are today, continuing to smooth out some of the newly implemented procedures and looking for sustainability and what this looks like going forward. So I'm going to talk about a little bit about the PSA, so our risk tool data. There's actually quite a bit of PSAs that have been done over the last 2.5 years, and we've learned a lot. The PSAs have 3 scores. One is kind of your probability to be rearrested, your probability of not coming to court. And then one is a flag, that PSA flag, which means kind of your probability to have a violent offense during your pretrial stay. So what you see here in the first one is just the total number of PSAs and the percentages that are flagged as violent. And this is something that the judge may or may not take into consideration.
Aaron, so I understand, what's PSA?
Public safety assessment.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, from the now it's Arnold Ventures. We do a lot of outcome comparison, outcome tracking. I have a lot of different pages of data, so deciding how to present and what to present here, we can go into more later. But one of the main reasons why we have pretrial services, the main thing is to help folks not be rearrested and get to court. So if you look at our 2019-2020 data, you can see that our rearrest and failure to appear went down. And just as a reminder, that's when we implemented our pretrial monitoring and we implemented our court reminders. So after implementing a little bit of monitoring and having those text message reminders, you can see it has had an effect on some of those points that we track. This is
Aaron,
a big graph.
As long
but
as you're talking about that, I mean, what I hear is that is not what held true through the first part of 2021.
So I will tell you that for 2020 this year, right?
Yeah, for 2020.
No,
Sorry,
I'm
we're
like,
doing
oh, no,
2021
I know,
budgeting. My
but, okay,
brain's
it
a
is,
little
we're in
muddled.
2020, right? So January, February, March, so you are correct. In mid-March, due to COVID, our criminal justice stakeholders sat down together and did some hard pivots to adjust to the COVID, to make it more safe for some of our programming and procedures in criminal justice. And part of that is communicating that. There has been a lot of failure to appears, probably starting mid-March through recent, just because there's some changes made in those procedures, but also folks may thought that the courthouse was closed when it really wasn't, when the county came out and said it's closed. So there's a lot of reasons why, probably during COVID, there was some increased failure to appears. But I don't know that the court reminder, this nearly made a difference. This data is just for the first 3 months. So that piece that you're talking about, Commissioner, really probably was enacted the last part of March or beginning of April. For
Okay.
those court, we would see that increase come April, May.
Significant increase?
Have not analyzed that data yet, but
Okay.
I will tell you when I get that. And just as a note, these outcomes are based on those that have a PSA, which means they had initial appearance. But we'll have that updated data. This is just comparing Q1, which is January, February, March.
Okay. When would we get that data?
So the end of June would be Q2. So
Okay.
probably in July is when we'd be looking at getting those updated numbers to look at.
Okay, thank you.
But that brings in, just since we're talking about that now, the agility of pretrial and understanding that hopefully part of the MacArthur Foundation, we are asked to reapply for another 2 years. One of the things that they asked is to put into our application is how can we sustain some of the changes made during COVID to be long-term. So to get to your point, it will be very important to look at the data and figure out how can we use our pretrial services staff, department, and resources to help with some of those things, which needs to happen as soon as we get that data.
Okay.
This is going back, this is one of the data pieces we look at. What it does is it puts in, that's the grid. So like I said, the PSA, you have 2 scores at FTA, which is failure to appear, and at NCA, which is new criminal activity. And you can score 1 to 6 on that. So what you see here is the matrix of those scores. We look at the number of PSAs, the percentage of PSAs, and how many have flagged and how many individuals. I don't have the mouse, but if I did, if you would,
I don't think this is on Dropbox, is it?
Not yet, it will be.
Okay.
The corner, which you can't see on here, but there's it's not just the PSA risk score that's important about this data. This data can tell us a lot about strategies for our criminal justice system. If you look, you can't see probably, but in 6.6 has some of our highest numbers. But what that reflects isn't necessarily individuals that pose a public safety risk. What the PSA scores is someone's propensity to be rearrested and somebody not to come to court. And a lot of those, if you look in, there's more individuals than PSAs. There's a lot of repeat individuals. And what that reflects is some of those, friendly faces that we see cycle through over and over and over. But they're not necessarily a public safety risk. So that goes into different strategies like the triage center, hoping to act as an intervention. So instead of being arrested and go to the jail, they can access some services at the triage center. And for us as a system and implementation team to really look at those friendly faces and see how we can stop that cycle from happening. Something else about this grid, when somebody gets put on pretrial services, this is what they use to determine, to look at how many times a person should check in based on these scores. This isn't the only consideration. We also sit down with the person as part of the intake process and actually ask, what do you need during the pretrial, during this phase to make sure you get to court and not get rearrested, and we refer out to services as well. So it's a combination of this as well as meeting those person's needs in the kind of the interim.
So are those pretrial folks that are meeting with those folks to assess their needs?
Yeah, it's more of a, I would say, screening versus an assessment. And during COVID, some of that's been happening over the phone or video opportunities. We'll go back to in-person. But yeah, part of the intake process, anyone that's assigned to pretrial services, the pretrial staff actually does the intake with them. And our intake form, everything that we do is based around minimizing our rearrests and minimizing our FTAs. So our intake questionnaire matches that and literally asking the person, what do you need to be successful? It could be housing, transportation, jobs, food, better freight, so that we try, and then we have a list. Pretrial has a list to refer, so referring to county human services or providers or for bus passes or that kind of thing to try to meet those needs of that person, make sure they get to court and don't get rearrested. We're continually fine-tuning that as we go through. So talking about our pretrial monitoring, there's a couple different ways that a person can check in. There's web-based on the actual website. There's a spot, because sometimes it's easier for a person to stop by the public library or stop somewhere and get on the internet, so they can check in web-based. They can text to check in. They have email. You can actually call into the phone to check in and leave a message. And then at the end of this, you'll have a demo of our facial recognition app, and that just got up and going over the last few weeks. Something to note about the facial recognition app is the individual has to have a smartphone that's consistent and working and an email address that's working they can check in order to be, so one, you want to make sure it's a good fit for that client, for that participant. In addition to, they have to have that smartphone and email address to have it be a good fit to utilize that facial recognition app. Since we started, we went live in the end of February. There's been 29 total clients assigned to pretrial monitoring, 1 successful completion, 4 not reinstated into pretrial, and right now there's currently 23 assigned to the pretrial monitoring. Just another note is this is we're implementing over the last few years a whole new process, a whole new piece of our justice system, and this is a new program for judges to utilize. So as we've only been going at this a few months, and we started slow. We started implementing with 1 judge in circuit court, then expanded to all of circuit court, and then implemented into magistrate court and expanded through magistrate court. So we're hoping that the idea is that this program and utilization would grow over this year and next year. So here's another piece of our expanding scope, which is court reminders and case processing. Just to hit on the case processing piece, 2 main things. One is the in-custody review team, ICRT, and this is a team made up of the attorneys, so the public defenders, public advocate, pretrial, someone from the jail, court administration, probation, prosecutors. They meet bi-weekly to staff cases to make sure no one fell through the cracks and to see if there's anyone currently in custody that could be safe released on a pretrial monitoring service. So then since it started last September, October, there's been 58 cases expedited, which if you look at our Arnold Foundation data and report, that was one of the main things for us to work on to help affect our jail population, is to expedite some of those court cases that are taking longer. So we had 58 cases expedited, and we had 38 referred to services. And what that means is we have Alliance at that table as well. So if there's someone on that list that Alliance or someone thinks they need a referral for assistance on any sort of services, Alliance takes them, talks to them, and gets them referred to the right avenue. We haven't done many pretrial releases yet because we just got started with the pretrial kind of monitoring, pretrial monitoring program in February. So now we'll be expanding to allowing that for in-custody team to utilize bi-weekly as well. Another piece of the case processing that pretrial helps out with is mental health screenings. Everyone that goes into our jail is screened by our nurse, and a piece of that is a mental health screen. If that individual agrees to and signs the release, the outcome of those questions, whether they're a low risk, medium risk, or high risk, or high need, I shouldn't say risk, high need for mental health services is shared with some of the courts in order for them to get referral to services as need be. And that has just started too within the last few months. The other piece of this is the court reminders. There have been, since we went live, there has been thousands of court reminders sent out. And again, what we're really trying to track is failure to appears is what we're trying to have a dent in here. And as you can see, I compared the first 2 as 2019 to 2020, understanding that for the period of COVID, there's a lot of confounding variables that assisted, for failure to appears. But as you can see with the bars, the first 2 2019, the second 2 2020, is there have been less PSAs closed due to failure to appear. And court reminders, it's an automatic text message that our software vendor, Open Lattice, has developed. It actually does it automatically because we're integrated with UJS. But the biggest opportunity for problem solving that we have is getting the correct phone number for our participants. And we've worked with the participants in the courts and different offices to try to get better phone numbers as we're sending out these court reminders to individuals. And that will, again, we'll continue to look at ways to improve the court reminder process and get that word out there.
Does that happen during intake? I mean, when you're meeting with these folks, do you get phone
Yep.
numbers at that point?
Yep, and some folks, so everyone that has a court reminder are those that get a PSA, or that a PSA is done on. If, and not all PSAs get put on pretrial services. So if they're put on pretrial services, we have a way better way to get a hold of them, not just a phone number, but other ways. It comes in that gap where the folks aren't necessarily put on pretrial services. We utilize the phone numbers given that the individual gives during like jail intake process or in the courts. So we're working on ways to try to get better phone numbers from participants. Next. So here's some next steps. It's continue to expand. So Lincoln County is using PSAs, but part of what they contracted for is to utilize kind of the pretrial monitoring services. So our pretrial staff is working with Lincoln County courts to get that up and going. And execute that process and procedure that looks like that. And a second piece, as we mentioned earlier, is the ability to adapt to meet the need or the needs of the courts or of the criminal justice system throughout this next year, year and a half. As we get some of these pieces solidified, where are there opportunities, and we're being asked to by the MacArthur in our next application to help try to maintain some of those changes made during COVID. So I foresee pretrial playing a big role in that. Another thing that's very exciting, because we're a MacArthur Foundation site and some of the other work, we're actually getting at no cost, or as part of being part of the MacArthur network, one of the leading experts of pretrial writing our policies and procedures. We're going through that right now. He's actually the incoming president of NAPSA, which is the National Association for Pretrial. He helped pen and contribute to the most recent pretrial standards that were released in 2020, and now he's helping us with our policy and procedures. I can tell you that he was very impressed with the philosophy and implementation that we did and how we're approaching it, taking out chunks at a time to make sure we meet the needs that we need to meet, and having the purpose of our pretrial be to help people not get rearrested and failure to appear. So we do have kudos from a leading expert right now, and we'll be finalizing those policies and procedures this summer, hopefully to be approved by the end of this year. That's very exciting. We want to ramp up monitoring. As I said, over these last few months, we've worked with all of our system stakeholders to get those processes and procedures and sign up and who gets on up and going and what they are. We want to really drill in and make sure we're making the needs to be able to expand the scope of our monitoring and have more clients. And then something else we're working on as part of MacArthur, but also part of the USD team is to look at data. We'd like to have better consistent data from our courts specifically, since a lot of our outcomes come from the courts. So over the next few months, we'll be working with UJS to make sure we're kind of getting some of those measures to kind of dig deeper into some of these things. And I'll pause for questions because the next few slides are some screenshots for pretrial to do our facial recognition demo.
Commissioner Heiberger.
Maybe you could just introduce the gals, and then I have one other comment, too.
Oh, sorry, yes. I was going to wait. This is Janelle Ingalls. We have Holly Hansen and Amanda Peterson.
Okay.
And then my other comment was that this kind of all started when we did the assessment on whether we needed a jail or not a long time ago. And at the end of Mr. Garnos' report, he said, this is your projection line unless you guys start to figure out different ways to do things when you're incarcerating people. And so that's where, so this timeline even started before where Erin has it at. And then because of that, we got that assessment that she started out. Her presentation was because in part of the it also delayed our construction of the jail a little bit as we tried to figure out what we could do to try to decrease the number of people in jail safely. And so it has been a progression of even more than 5 years as we've worked forward on this. And so, thank you.
Other questions? Commissioner Karski.
Throw you a curveball here, if you don't mind, Aaron. A lot of great information and data. And for the people maybe watching or listening, they're probably trying to figure out what exactly is she talking about. So if you could, in 30 words or less, what have we done and are we being successful?
I would say that we've been very successful. Over the last 5 years, we've implemented, as I've said a few times, a whole new kind of piece of our court system. There's always been a pretrial, which is the time from arrest to the time you have your court and it's finalized. And we've always had, we were actually one of the first to have a monitoring program 24/7, but to really dig in and figure out how we can expedite and make that, even take those, kind of that process the next step. We've
Are
done
we
that.
trying to keep people from spending time in jail before
Pre-trial.
trial?
Yeah.
Are we trying to get people to trial quicker? Or
Oh, thank you. Sorry.
Okay.
I was like, oh. Yeah, the point of pretrial, like I said, is to, there's a few things. One is we want to try to get folks as court to quickly as possible as part of the Constitution, is to kind of expedite that court process. So implementing different case processing and things in the court, and Judge Howman, we can invite her back to kind of talk through some of those things that have been implemented because of that. The other piece is, helping folks make sure they don't get rearrested and helping them get to court, whether it's court reminders, assuring they have transportation, that sort of thing is another piece that we've been trying to do. And with the preliminary data, and it's hard when you've been barely doing some of the court reminders and the monitoring for less than a year to really have solid outcome data. You need to have a couple years of implementation to really come back to that. But for what we've done so far and some of the preliminary data indicates that we're on the right track.
Good.
So, and I mean, just to kind of jump in there, I mean, and I think that just even from this presentation, I can tell that pretrial probably means more to you than it meant to me. I mean, pretrial to me was more the tool in the helping the judges keep the people that needed to be in jail because they were dangerous to society in jail, and those that were not, to release them so they could be home with their families and keep their jobs and stay productive parts of the community until they actually appeared in jail. But I think you live in this world, and so it all makes sense to you. For those of us who don't live in the world and might be listening to it, but I would put myself in that camp as well. It's hard to kind of understand how all these pieces work together and how they're all part of the same thing. And I think you keep saying we've kind of started a new part of the criminal justice system. Can you explain what the state's role has been in that? Since the criminal justice system, the courts are really owned by the state of South Dakota.
Yeah, that was been a discussion early on when you're looking at pretrial, if you look across the nation. And just to define pretrial, loosely defined, it's that time, again, from the time someone's arrested to the time that their court is actually finalized, whether they're found guilty or not guilty and sentenced. And a lot of things can happen in between there. There's a lot of decision points that can happen. And then we say it's one system, but really it's multiple different departments and electeds working together to make it happen. So when we say system, I just want to make sure, like you said, the comprehensive piece of that was articulated. What was the specific question?
I was just asking what the state's role was.
Yeah, so
in
the
this.
state's role specifically, as we look across the nation, pretrial is housed in, a couple different pieces, the counties, the courts. In some places, that's the same. Pennington County really has theirs under the sheriff's office. Some have it under the sheriff, some it's their very own department under the executive piece of the county. So it just depends on how your state laws, regulations, and your process works. And in South Dakota, the way some of the laws are written, pretrial is the responsibility of the counties. So the state's role, so that's why it was originally housed and looking for reasons or places to have it here. That's why it was housed here originally. But the state plays a key piece, and that's why our pretrial services works very closely with our judges during this pretrial phase, and a little bit with probation if somebody's in the pretrial phase and also on probation. But really, our judges are our biggest partner in this because they are the ones that are going to be referring folks, to this program. And that would be the state's role in kind of supporting that. They've also shared their data. So we worked really closely with them to get the data to come and to be shared and combined is another piece in that way, and also to be able to extract data to assist our system to kind of, like I said, track some of those outcome measures.
Commissioner Heiberger.
And the MOU that we had from the very beginning was with the UJS and the state of South Dakota. So if you want to just maybe speak to that, maybe that gives a better idea of because it's not just us, it's Pennington County, and it's
Right, but yeah, the MOU, so that's what the UJS has always been very supportive of, implementing new processes and innovations for the pretrial piece. And so it started with the MOU of implementing that pretrial risk tool, and the collaboration and partnership has only grown from there.
Other questions? Commissioner Benega.
Aaron, this is kind of a silly question, but with all the data, the financial commitment, and all the things that we've put together in this process, do you have any testimonials from the judicial system on what their gut feeling is on how this has worked and what they'd like to see corrected or enhanced?
I've actually had some quotes in the past. Some of the information we get together for the judges, specifically for the risk instruments, and we're in constant communication with them on that. But one of the pieces that they like the most, a judge said specifically, is Open Lattice aggregates all the data for them. So if you go into Open Lattice, there's one box for this individual that says how many times they've been charged with a misdemeanor or a felony or a violent charge, how many times they've actually been, and how many times they've actually been convicted. So instead of scrolling through different clicks of the history, that's summarized for them. Something else that pretrial does is they look at criminal history reports, III they're called, from across the nation, and they review those and summarize those as part of the notes piece for initial appearance. The state's attorney's office has always had those and talked to them, but even the attorneys, the state says they really appreciate that summarization, because it can, sometimes it's pretty quick, but sometimes they can, they're very difficult to read. So that was another piece that they've really appreciated. Something else the judges said that they're really looking forward and have been to the pretrial monitoring piece. We always, a continuum of options is always the kind of the best way forward, no matter what decision point you're looking at in our criminal justice system. And the judges are really looking forward to some of these different pretrial monitoring and facial recognition pieces.
So the bottom line is they are using this and it's part of their decision-making process?
Somewhat, yes. Some use it more than others, and it's part of we're implementing the risk tool based on best practices, given some of the most recent research, where it's a part of the consideration of the whole person to look at, to see what's best for the pretrial phase for the risk tool, and also some of the summary information, the mental health screening, and then the pretrial monitoring as well.
Other questions?
I'll just make the comment that I've been working on this for probably 11 years, because it started in the in the juvenile side, which we've made huge changes in the juvenile side. And if you follow that at all, you will see just the huge impact that we had, positive impact. And even with me working at it and attending lots of conferences and education, I still get mixed up. Because I didn't understand the judicial side before I came to this job, and so it's been a huge educational curve for me too. And I'm in it all the time. We meet every other week for sure, discussing this stuff, and there's always stuff in my email box about it. So even being the person that follows it the closest for the commission, it's still difficult at times.
Yeah, and that's a really good, because sometimes I have to go and ask questions too, and so does staff, to talk to different attorneys and judges exactly how are things done here. We've always had the pretrial phase. The new part is some of these new processes and procedures and opportunities for monitoring that we're getting up and implemented. And when you're working with, multiple stakeholders, multiple electeds, multiple decision makers during that piece, trying to get things coordinated. We've done a lot of that, so I'm hoping now that the coordination piece is done, we can start ramping up more.
Commissioner Heiberger.
I have one more comment too. Since Erin doesn't work for us anymore and she works for USD Med School, this pretrial staff is under the commission office under Carol. And so Carol is actually their supervisor, in case you weren't aware.
All right, thank you.
All right, the only thing is a demo.
Oh.
So I'll let,
You're going to see if you can recognize Commissioner Barth's face?
that would have been.
Put your mask on.
My phone doesn't recognize me. I don't have my mask on.
Amanda Peterson with Pretrial. So we're going to give you guys a demo of one of the ways that we are monitoring and communicating with clients that are participating in our monitoring program. What you're seeing on the screen are some screenshots of what we see when we go to double check their check-in. So we have a list of clients that we are able to choose from, and then we are able to see whether they've checked in, whether there's something we need to follow up on, whether it was a successful match or not. One of the ways that we get started is we take an initial picture when they set up the account, and then we can manually set up different check-in times. That will send them a message that they need to check in, just like on any other app on your phone. And then we can go in and check to make sure that they have done that. There's 5 questions on there. We can turn the slide. There's 5 questions when they go to check in that they have to answer, which help us to determine, do we need to provide them with some follow-up information? Maybe that would be some community resources for behavior management, like the counseling or the housing, transportation, those kinds of things. We also ask them if they've had any law enforcement contact. We ask them about their home and address and whether that needs to be updated or not. And we also check in with them to make sure that they're talking with their attorney so that we can continue to help with case processing. And so those are just a few different ways that we're able to help them be aware of what's going on with their case and keep it processing and show up for their hearings. Holly, if you want to go ahead and show, this is kind of the facial recognition matchup, so we know that they successfully matched up when they check in. And Holly's going to show on her phone what the actual check-in looks like.
Okay, so as a client, they would download the Touchpoint app. They would get a notification when it's time for them to do their check-in. So it's telling me I need to check in. It's asking for a facial picture. So take a quick little, oh, it goes questions first. So am I still living at the same address? Yes. Same phone number. Have I had any contact with law enforcement? Have not. Have I been in contact with my attorney? Yes. Do I need any resources? No. And then I'll take my selfie. And then I will use that photo. Submit. And then their check-in is successful. They've done their weekly or bi-weekly, monthly check-in.
And what happens if they don't do it?
We do get notified on that same website, so it'll just show as a missed check-in, and that's when us as staff would reach out to that client based on their phone number, their email, or other resources.
Any repercussions to not checking in?
You become a county commissioner.
Sense.
We give them a little bit of leeway, but over time, we would contact the judge in charge of their case and see if they would wish to.
Yeah, no, that's fine, just, you're in the mug. What Janelle was saying is how we've set it up, and we're, like I said, we're working hand in glove with some of the pretrial experts, is every Friday, pretrial puts together a summary of the folks on pretrial and how they're doing, because some may be checking in and doing great, some may be missing some check-ins. So what they do is they see if their attorney has been contacted, they do a little bit of work to try to find them, contact their email, phone number, if they give in any other person to try to help locate them, and then contact their attorney and also put that in the note. So then and that email goes out to defense, prosecutors, and the judges for them to kind of make that decision on how they want to respond to that specific case, because they have a lot more facts in their files regarding each person as well. So that's how we have it set up right now. And after talking to some of those national experts and working with our stakeholders here, it's actually, for this first 2 months, like I said, you're always evolving to be better, but that's how that's done right now. So then it goes straight every week. So it's both. We have it's called the response. We have a response grid where there's specific responses for pretrial to do, and then note that they did that, and then that decision ultimately lies with the state's attorney and the judge and the defense attorney.
Commissioner Heiberger?
So like with 24/7, you have to come down here, and blow. And they monitored a lot of people over the years, maybe not necessarily somebody who was blowing because they were on alcohol, had an alcohol conviction, or not conviction, but a charge. And so now you can do voice or face recognition, and you can live clear down on 57th Street, and you don't have to drive clear down here to check into 24/7 to say, I'm here, I'm good. And so for some people, I think it's been really helpful. You can check in at work. You don't have to leave work to come down here to check in and say, I'm behaving. So it's helped people continue on with their normal life. And we've been hoping for facial recognition since the very beginning, and I don't know where we're at this, but it would be nice if at some point they could actually blow on their phone and could be responsible that way. But
Their 24/7 does have remote breath. It's not on their personal cell phone yet, but it's the smart breath, which you guys have heard about from the sheriff's office.
yeah, I wasn't sure whether we had those connected.
So
yet
it's
or
not
so.
attached to your smartphone, it's attached to a separate device.
Which is what they've been using since
Yeah,
COVID.
the smart,
right?
yeah, that,
Yeah.
the smart.
I just didn't know if we had it with the face recognition
Not yet.
and the blow at the
Not
same
yet.
time. That was my point.
But, yeah, at some point, yes. Any other questions or?
Other questions? Well, we took a lot of your time, and but it was very informative. We really appreciate you guys taking the time. So Michelle Boyd was going to come in. Are you the cleanup batter here, Michelle?
I don't know about that. Michelle Boyd with the Sheriff's Office. But I just wanted to take a second. I know Erin introduced Jasmine, but if you want to come up for Jasmine. Jasmine is a corporal with the Sheriff's Office, and she is assisting with pretrial, as Erin said, but she also helps with what you're talking about, the 24/7, the electronic monitoring, all of those programs and services she's kind of overseeing. And I think one of the things that I just want to make sure we all understand, you know, we have all the specialty courts and some of those things set up that once somebody's went through the court system and been in trouble, sentenced, maybe on their way to the pen, we have all these services we try to wrap around them to help them then, but there really was nothing on the front end for people. So you get arrested, you maybe get a bond, you don't have much supervision, your only connection really is your defense attorney, or your defense attorney. They have a heavy caseload, but what we're trying to do is keep people so that they don't keep getting rearrested, coming back to jail before they've even seen sometimes their second court appearance. And so we see that on the front end of all these people, that there needs to be something wrapped around them to help them to understand some of the things you guys are questioning, of even how the court system works and those types of things, how to maybe get a job, how to stay connected, treatment, you know, some of those kinds of things. So this group here is really trying to support on the front end versus some of them that we have set up on the back end. The adult diversion we're talking about doing through the state's attorney's office, I see them connecting really closely with that program if we get the funding for that, and trying to build up kind of that pillar on the front end. And I think that would help us with our jail numbers and keeping people out of jail. So just wanted to clarify that, and they're doing a great job, so thank you for the time.
Commissioner, I have a question on Commissioner Benega. I'll let you go first.
Through our budget process, we've been told about the non-appearing individual and the number of backlogs we have for the court system. How's that? I mean, we're being told that a lot of that's being COVID-19 related issues. How are we going to justify the continuation of some of the programs that we have when it's hard to get those statistical information packets, if you will? Because I think all of us are pretty sure it's COVID-19, but there's probably no way to hard code that, so to speak.
Right, well, I'm hoping, I think we're all hopeful now that the courts have opened up more, and we will be able to start tracking that better and make, you know, we're gonna have to identify that it's helping, obviously, to keep the programs going. So post-COVID, we're really hoping that all of these things that we have set up are gonna be assisting them to get them to court. I know that we've had a number of people come to the courthouse that said they thought the courthouse was closed.
Sure.
You know, the attorneys can only contact so many people. They only have so much time. They're trying to get, you know, their stuff done as well. So I don't have an answer for you. we're all identifying it right now as COVID. I'm sure some of it is, some of it isn't. You know, we see a lot of failed to appears come through the state's attorney's office, but that's kind of the goal, to try to make sure those numbers are going down in what we're doing. The diversion program, I think, will really help with that as well. It just gives people that tie to different things that they don't understand that are even out in the community.
So is that a question that's asked pre-trial when you're trying to get a hold of them? Are you going to be affected by the COVID-19 requests from the judicial system or whatever?
Not technically.
Yeah, as of right now, again, with COVID, and we started doing our pretrial monitoring like 2 weeks later, well, 4 weeks later, COVID really hit. And the justice system really came together and did a hard pivot fast within a week, changed a bunch of different policy and procedures in the bond schedule to respond. So whenever you're implementing any new program, especially for court reminders and something like this, it takes a while to catch on, kind of find the niche, where is the exact gap. Right now it's a very global gap, as you said. And we are able to actually look at the data and compare once COVID, we don't know, is COVID still going on, is it going to end? We'll have Q2 data coming soon to kind of look at that. But the hope and the point is to have that these 4 folks work with those community stakeholders as they look, okay, how do we get through our backlog that happened during COVID? There was an increase of FTAs during COVID, and it can be directly tied to the fact that if you didn't have a
Failure
mask
to
up-
appear,
Sorry.
FTAs.
FTAs,
Sorry.
failure to appear.
It's the constant challenge here, because we all have our own lingo in our own industries.
Yeah,
so.
failure to appears, you know, if you did one, just like Michelle said, they thought the courthouse was closed, and the county says, we're closed. My mom thought the courthouse was closed, you know. So and actually the courts are still open. If you didn't have a mask, if you did show up, if you didn't have a mask, you were turned away from coming into the courthouse. And then you couple that with the normal folks that don't come to court. Having our court reminder system up and going for about a year or less, there's lots of opportunities to grow and meet that need. And the hope is to grow the program, use our pretrial services staff and those resources to fill that need going forward. And what does that look like? We just didn't have that time to have that sort of integrative implementation plan, because everyone, as you guys have been a part leaders, had to make decisions and change just like that. So now it's playing catch up and figuring out what does that look like going forward. Because there are ways that I have a bunch of different websites and resources of how to kind of respond and get through this for the next 6 months.
My question is, and to tie this, because we have a budget hearing again right after our commission meeting today. So we've got 2 positions that are show up as grant funded positions on the spreadsheets, the information that we were given. So the one is your position, correct? Yeah, the corporal in the jail. And that funding ends this year, correct?
Correct.
I'm looking at Michelle, but you can answer, Erin, I don't know.
Yes, so the corporal position is one of the positions that we had, we were gonna program that for when the new jail opened. The MacArthur Foundation allowed us to hire her early and start doing this to work with the pretrial group to try to start integrating that before we move into the new jail. So you saw in the sheriff's office, or I think on the jail side, in the request of a new corporal position. That will be the position that we intended to hire once the jail opens. She's just in place, was it 8 months early maybe? Because there was funding left over from the MacArthur Foundation. And so it kind of integrates really well, because as you guys know, we have access to information on people who have been arrested throughout our jail management system that pretrial wouldn't have access to. And so Jasmine works really well with them to maybe locate people, identify where they're living, or some things that we might know that pretrial wouldn't be privy to because it's law enforcement records. So that really works well there.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
And just for the commissioner's sake, that only shows up, that position, even though in your mind it's requesting a new position. For us, it just shows up on that grant-funded page, which is already included in our budget. And then the other one is the pretrial coordinator, and I don't know if that is tied to any position, one position here today or not.
There was, from the grant, it was in that timeline, half of the pretrial coordinator is the pretrial staff. Half of one position is covered by this grant, and 25% by Lincoln County and 25% from Minnehaha County General Funds is how that had been in the past.
Okay, and so in our notes, it has that funding may be renewed. for that position for 2021. And I'm curious, we had some conversations here yesterday about how our decision-making about that position affects funding through the MacArthur grant.
Right, so the funding that we have for all the grant-funded positions technically ends at the end of September of 2020. We will ask for a no-cost extension, because there is funding to cover the grant-funded positions through the end of this fiscal year, your fiscal year of December 2020. We were asked for a renewal application from the MacArthur for another 2 years of funding. They said that funding needs to focus on sustaining the changes made during COVID and have all strategies tied to that, as well as, and this has been their big mantra, is addressing racial and ethnic equities within our justice system is the other big piece of that grant. So as you guys work through your budget and you look at things that you want to sustain, you look at sustainability. If positions are working, it's an investment. That's would be a decision for you guys to make, and the grant funding for those positions would have to tie in under those two pillars, and then we turn in an application and wait for that to be approved. We do have an implementation team from the MacArthur Foundation to put through a work plan or application that we're working through this summer. The due date for that application is September of this year.
So if it shows up in our preliminary budget that we've approved this position, does that mean that MacArthur will not fund it for 2021?
Right, you wouldn't want, you'd want to think about how you word that, because it's called supplanting. And if this is something that, and the MacArthur looks at, in fact, I've been on calls with them, how are you going to sustain the work that MacArthur is paying for going forward on some of the positions? So that would be something that usually granted, it's called supplanting, that you don't want to use grant funded positions that are able to be covered, by a budget, whether that's county or whoever the applicant is, nonprofit, anyone, but it's called supplanting.
So do you have any guidance for us with that particular position?
Kind of, like I said, it's completely up to you guys, but as you look at, and this is something MacArthur asks and that I recommend too, is you look at sustainability and taking on pieces that that you want to continue of this. Right now, the grant funds half of each of those FTEs. There's also an alliance position, because we're talking about 3 that are half funded right now through this grant. And as you look at taking on different sections to make things sustainable, taking on one full FTE this year, maybe another one next year, I think that would be my recommendation, just from sustainability and taking off chunks to make this sustainable once MacArthur funds do go away, and that MacArthur funds aren't necessarily a guarantee of how we apply it, because last time we did an application and it basically completely changed from their recommendations and some of their data. So that would be my sort of guidance as you guys look as commission and at these grant-funded positions, to start kind of taking on different chunks at a time of the pieces that you want to sustain long-term.
I would like to visit with you after the commission meeting if
All right.
you have a couple minutes.
Yep.
And so right now Lincoln County does 25% of that position, and if the MacArthur funding goes away in 2021, how is that position going to be paid for? Is it 75% Minnehaha County and 25% Lincoln County, or I don't even know how that's how it got put in the budget. It's not that Lincoln County is going to pony up and do half, and we are going to do half.
They would continue to do the 25%.
Has there been a request that they do more than 25% if the MacArthur funding goes away?
No, as of right now, there has not been.
It was based on the number of people that we were using with pretrial, based on the numbers that we had. When we met with them early on, that was what we came up with the numbers. I'm wondering as we expand pretrial and they have more, will there be an opportunity for them to pay for more? Because just from your presentation, I wondered if that number would go up.
Yeah, we could look at our data. I will tell, really it's based on caseload and the number of participants, PSAs, that sort of thing. We can relook at it. But knowing what I know of the number of PSAs, 25% is, we can retake a look at those numbers, and you guys, we can get things ready and have conversations with Lincoln County too.
Okay. Any other questions? I kind of monopolized things, sorry. All right, thank you all very much. All right, so that takes us to item 11, to authorize the chair to sign a renewal agreement between Minnehaha County and Summit Foods Service LLC to provide meals to the Juvenile Detention Center. Jamie Gravitt. Is Jamie here in person or?
Good morning, Commissioners.
Hi, Jamie.
Gravitt, Director of JDC.
Hi,
Can you hear me?
we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Okay.
Okay.
Yes. Today I'm presenting the contract for our annual food service management company that we utilize through the school lunch program. We are allowed to do 4 renewals of the original contract signed in 2017. That gives us 1 more year after this year, and then we'll have to RFP according to rules. There's a 3.5% increase this year. We utilized the CPI for the past 12 months ending in April, and that's what it was. It'll raise the cost of our meals up to $2.42 and snacks up to 89 cents. I'd ask that you would approve this contract.
Questions for Jamie? If not, I'd consider a motion.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. All right, so that takes us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. That takes us to item 12, which is to consider 14 resolutions to apply to the South Dakota Department of Transportation Local Federal Bridge Replacement Program. DJ, hi, I can see you.
Morning, Commissioner. DJ Boothie, Highway Superintendent. We became aware of a program that the Department of Transportation has for this year in February, or maybe it was in March. And it's a federal bridge replacement program that the state is going to administer. Last year they had this same program, or a similar program, and they had state funding available to basically disperse the funds to the local governments. And so last year we simply received a check. We reported back to them how we spent that money on our bridge rehab and replacement projects, and the program worked great. This year, probably a lot because of COVID, and also just because it's a large dollar amount. The state does not have the funds available in state monies to forward that on to the local governments, and so we have to follow the federal rules for the funding. And so this year there's an application process that we're following, and if we are successful in receiving the funding, the state will administer some bridge replacement projects for us. And so this year there's $25.8 million in federal funds that are available, and any bridge that has a poor condition rating is eligible to be applied for a replacement or rehabilitation. We received information from the DOT that 26 of our structures are allowed to be able to be applied for this type of funding. We selected 14 of those that we wanted to apply for. 7 of those are on our county highway system. 7 of them are on the township system. 8 of them were already in our 5-year plan. And so of the 14 bridges, the total cost expected for this is about $10.7 million. Right now, we're thinking that the program is going to be an 80%, 20% match. And so of that $10.7 million, 8.5 would be federal dollars and about 2.1 would be local dollars. The funds, the way that the program is set up, the funds have to be obligated by September 30th of 2023. So they all wouldn't be 2021 projects. We're not looking at doing 14 bridges next year, but the funds do have to be obligated by 2023. We don't expect to receive a grant for all 14 of these bridges, but we wanted to apply for them not knowing how many we would be able to get. So with that, I can stand by for any questions. There is a map on the second page of the briefing memo that shows where these bridges are located. Most of them are in the east half of the county, but I'll stand by for any questions.
So before I turn it over for questions, I just want to let you know that the state's attorney has been very helpful and has advised that we could take these all in one motion. But if through your question you find out that there's 1 or 2 that you don't want to attach as one motion, if you could let me know that, we could pull those out. Are there any questions for DJ?
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Barth.
DJ, in looking at the bridges, the one west of Renner that goes over the Big Sioux looks to be probably a long time project. I mean, shutting that road down will sort of semi-isolate that community and be a great impediment. It also looks like it's going to be pretty darn expensive to replace that bridge. I assume that it's currently safe. I drive over it fairly regularly. But it's also pretty high, and the riverbank is eroding there. And where is that on our list of priorities? And is that a high priority, or do we have other ones that are higher priority?
It's a high priority, but it's certainly not the highest priority. That bridge has had some pretty significant problems because the west side of that bridge has been basically falling in on itself. The westernmost bend has been tilting over and caused the beams to lock up against the abutments. And so there's some pretty significant structural issues with that structure. In addition to that, there's been a lot of erosion over the last few years, just in the Big Sioux River channel right there. And so that's a major cause of concern as well that needs to be addressed.
And while it will be a hardship while it's being constructed, it's really important to that community that that road be open and safe. So, good questions, though. Other questions?
Make a motion to approve all these items A through N.
So I motion and a second. I've been told I need to read every one of these structures, but we can take them all as one motion. So if you can read them, or I'll read them.
We could take turns. The first one is Structure A, NBI Structure 50-137-040. Second one is NBI Structure 50-137-217. Third one is NBI Structure 50-144-020. The fourth one is NBI Structure 50-189-140. Am I doing this okay, or do I need to explain
You're
the
doing great.
location? Okay. Item E, Structure 50-208-130. Item F, Structure 50-216-015. Item G, Structure 50-219-015. Item H, Structure 50-237-120. Item I, Structure 50-242-060. Item J, Structure 50-272-030. Item K, Structure number 50-273-090. Item L, 50-290-131. Item M, Structure 50-330-159. And finally, item N, as in November, Structure 50-330-183. And I should have beat feet down the hall just before starting this to emulate Melinda, who had to read these.
All right, so we had a motion and a second to approve the 14 projects. Any further comments or questions? If not, roll call vote, please.
Aye.
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 Aye. Motion passes unanimously. Thanks, DJ. All right. So that takes us to item 13, liaison reports. Are there any liaison reports? I would note that we had our very first meeting of the Accessible Housing Advisory Board, which is the new HAB group, and we will be looking for 5 at-large members there. So if anybody has any good ideas, I'd be open to contacting people, to encouraging them to participate in that. So we are hoping to get that all up and running here in the next month for sure. Any other liaison reports? All right, if not, new business. Is there any new business?
I would make a comment, Madam Chair. It seems to me that I saw that our state was given something like $1.4 billion by the federal government under the CARES Act. And, you know, they're gonna drizzle down 28 million towards our bridges, et cetera. It seems to me, where is that money going and why aren't we getting any of it for these things? And that's what I wanna say.
Commissioner Heiberger.
I will tell you that the association, the state association, is working with the governor's office and the financial office up there to look at all counties and what expenses are being spent towards COVID-related. And so that is still in the works. They are not obligated to give us anything, but that is being worked on.
Commissioner Benega.
I can tell you that some of those funds have been used to do COVID testing for all healthcare facilities, employees, and participants in those facilities. There's also programs like our nutrition program, adult daycare program, that have gotten additional support because of the need to keep people home and out of the COVID problem. So there has been distributions. I can't tell you what dollar amount that is by any stretch, but I do know that the first wave did spend a significant amount of that money on testing, and those results have been very positive for treatment.
All right, thank you. Those good comments. Anything else? Old business? Any old business? I take it as a point of personal privilege to wish my husband happy birthday today. I don't think he'll probably take it kindly that I put that under old business, but it is his birthday, so. All right, anything else? I then would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you all very much. We will take about a 5-minute break and reconvene for budgets.
Now you can run.